In this video, we'll be taking a close look at everything that you need to know about keeping and breeding the sparkling gourami, which is also sometimes called the Pygmy Gourami. Reaching a maximum length of around 1.5 inches or 38 millimeters, it is the world's smallest gourami. But don't let this nano-sized fish fool you. It has a big personality and plenty of good looks to compete with its larger relatives, like the dwarf gourami, the honey gourami, and the pearl gourami. These beautiful fish are known for their gorgeous blue eyes, their iridescent scales, and their ability to make a croaking sound using their pectoral fins. These micropredators can be quite shy in a bare tank, so they'll be a lot more visible and outgoing in a densely planted aquarium that uses both floating and submersed plants. Java fern, Anubias barderi, and frogbit are all great choices that are easy to grow and inexpensive. Furthermore, adding some dried leaves and driftwood will also help make these nano fish feel more at home. This is a 10-gallon tank, and it contains 6 sparkling gouramis. They're the only fish in this aquarium, but 6 of these nano fish in a 10-gallon tank is way more than most people would recommend due to possible problems with aggression. But the dense collection of plants and driftwood create plenty of cover for the fish, so there was never a problem with dangerous levels of aggression. At the top of the aquarium, there's a floating plant known as frogbit, and there's also some hornwort up near the surface as well. Both of these plants grow quickly in bright light and will help process some of the waste products produced by the fish. Towards the back of the tank, there's also a lot of suswassertang, which is a very helpful plant because it has a large amount of surface area that becomes colonized with beneficial bacteria. These beneficial bacteria are a key component for biological filtration that will help keep the nitrites and nitrates produced by the fish waste at very low levels, so they're not harmful to the fish. In the foreground, I have some Anubias nana petite growing on a piece of lava rock, as well as a couple Anubias barderi plants that are resting just above the black sand substrate. The Anubias plants cannot be planted directly in the sand or their rootstocks would begin to rot. So, the Anubias barderi are held in place just above the substrate by small plant weights. Otherwise, they would just float to the surface. This aquarium also contains a couple pieces of aged driftwood, as well as a couple dried stems with green leaves from an unknown plant. Now, it's important to note that it's not usually a good idea to put green leaves in your aquarium due to the fact that they can decompose rapidly, which can cause ammonia spikes and leach potentially harmful chemicals into the water. So if you're considering adding leaves into your aquarium, be sure that they are fully dried and brown. However, even though these leaves are a light green color, they were once bone dry and brittle to the touch, so I rolled the dice and added them in anyway. I sometimes add dried leaves from oak, elm, or maple trees to some of my tanks, and I always make sure to collect them far away from roads or houses to make sure that they don't have any chemicals on them from car exhaust, herbicides, or pesticides. It's also a good idea to soak the leaves in water for a day or two before adding them to your aquarium. And here's what this tank looked like 2 weeks later. Be sure to notice that those leaves that were once light green have now turned light brown. And the frogbit has now just about completely covered the surface of the water, and some of its long white roots have extended all the way down to the bottom of the aquarium. The growth of these roots is so rapid that I have to trim them about once a week to prevent them from getting too long and really anchoring into the substrate. So once a week I remove each one of the rosettes and cut the roots so they're only about an inch or two long. I also have to completely remove some of the frog bit every so often as well, so that the surface of the water isn't completely covered with plants. But I really don't mind the weekly trimming of the frog bit, because it's the fast-growing plants and the beneficial bacteria that are responsible for processing all of the waste products produced by the fish. And the rapid growth of the frog bit is fueled by its unlimited access to CO2 from above the surface of the water, as well as by a full-spectrum 2-foot LED grow light that I purchased from Walmart for just under $20. In fact, this tank does not have a filter, so it's the full-spectrum grow light that fuels the rapid plant growth, which in turn helps process the waste products produced by the fish. So the bright light is really the fuel that keeps this whole ecosystem running smoothly, just as the sun performs the same function here on Earth. Because without that great big light in the sky, none of us would be here. On the left is a view of the sparkling gourami tank shortly after I set it up, and the view on the right is what it looked like just 2 weeks later. The pH is right around 6.5 and the temperature hovers at around 79 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 degrees Celsius. The water is medium soft with a KH and a GH of around 5 or 6. And now it's time for a short commercial break to help pay the bills. But when we return, we'll talk about how to make these fish really sparkle as we take a closer look at their anatomy. The sparkling gourami gets its name from the iridescent scales and fins that sparkle and shine when the light hits them just right. And to really see these iridescent scales at their best, the light should shine on the tank not from directly above the fish, but from the front of the tank at about a 45-degree angle. And that's when these little fish will really sparkle and shine the best. Nonetheless, I assume that those bright sparkly scales are there to attract other sparkling gouramis when preparing to spawn. And you'll get to see them laying eggs soon enough, and we'll even take a close-up look at their babies as well. But first, let's just take the time to appreciate how beautiful they are. They're just like other gouramis in many ways, except they're very small. They have the same thin, modified ventral fins, just like their larger relatives, but their ventral fins are much shorter. And like all gouramis, they have a special organ just above their gill covers that's used to extract oxygen from above the surface of the water. But sparkling gouramis don't spend a lot of time up near the top of the aquarium like other gouramis, preferring instead to spend most of their time in the lower levels of the tank. Yes, they do still need to go to the surface occasionally to take in a breath of air, but they seem to do it much less frequently than their larger relatives, like the dwarf gourami or the pearl gourami. One of the most striking features of these fish are their bright blue eyes. But if you look closely, you'll see that their eyes can change from blue to green as the angle of the light changes. Now I'm just going to be quiet for a little while so that you can enjoy these fish in silence. But when I return, I'll talk about how to tell the males from the females. Sexing sparkling gouramis is easiest when the fish is at the surface, where the light can shine through the lower half of its body, which allows us to see a basic outline of their internal organs. The fish that you see here is a male, and his internal organs end right about here. But on a mature female, the ovaries can be seen extending down the body to right about here. And we'll take a look at a female in just a moment, but first, let's take a few seconds to look at this male so that we're familiar with what we're looking for. Now this is a female sparkling gourami, and you can clearly see her ovaries. If this was a male, the internal organs would have ended right here. And this space would be empty. And that's how you tell a male from a female sparkling gourami. There are 6 Pygmy Gouramis in this 10-gallon tank, and as far as I can tell, there are 4 females and 2 males. This is the smallest of the 2 males, and for some reason his tail fin seems to hang down every so often. So I'm not sure what his issue is, but he's definitely not like the rest of the fish in this tank. He does seem healthy enough, but I don't think that he's spawned with any of the females. This beautiful fish is the dominant male, and I'm fairly certain that he's been breeding with more than one of the females in his tank. And I'll show you why I think that is when we look at the eggs in the bubble nest. Now, with 2 males and 4 females in here, there's never a dull moment, as all 6 of these fish try to establish a pecking order and attempt to spawn. And every now and then, if I listen closely, I can hear them making a sound, usually described as a croaking noise, but to me it sounds more like a clicking rather than a croaking. The sound is produced by 2 tendons located at the base of the pectoral fins. These tendons are pulled over a tiny bone which causes them to snap back like a rubber band, at which point the tendons produce a sound. Both males and females can produce these noises, but the sound-producing tendons in the males are twice as large as the ones in the females, so the sounds produced by the males are much louder. And since the tendons of the males have a larger diameter, they produce a lower frequency sound, while the smaller diameter tendons of the females produce sounds that have a higher pitch, just as you'd expect from a guitar string. So in addition to being a beautiful nano fish, the sparkling gourami can also play a stringed instrument as well, which is just another reason to love these little fish. Nonetheless, sparkling gouramis make these sounds when they're in tense situations, such as when defending territories or breeding sites. The males also make these noises when they've built a bubble nest and they're trying to let nearby females know that they're available for spawning. This calling behavior would be very helpful in the wild where fish are spaced much further apart. And sounds can travel very far underwater, so the use of sound is a very effective means of communication for many fish species. Unfortunately, these fish didn't make as much sound as I hoped they would. I even put them in a room where it's very quiet, and since I didn't run a filter on this tank, the room where I filmed them had very little background noise. But still, I heard very little croaking or clicking from these fish. Maybe it's just that I needed more males, because this tank was mostly females. And finally, it's worth mentioning that there's a closely related fish called the croaking gourami that can make a similar sound as well. And the croaking gourami is sometimes confused with the sparkling gourami, but they are in fact two completely different species. As far as the choice of tank mates are concerned, sparkling gouramis can be shy fish who don't compete well with faster, more active species. So they may have trouble getting enough food if they're kept with a group of aggressive eaters. I would definitely avoid keeping them with bettas as well as other gouramis. And obviously, you don't want them to share a tank with anything large enough to eat them or an aggressive species. I also wouldn't suggest keeping them with cherry shrimp, but every tank setup is different, and things that I don't recommend might work perfectly in other setups. But I really think that these fish do their best when they have a small planted tank all to themselves. One male and two females in a 10-gallon aquarium would be perfect. Sparkling gouramis are small, shy fish, and in a community setting with other more active species, they may not get the food that they need. So you'll want to watch and make sure that they're finding enough to eat. And since they're such a small fish with small mouths, they'll need an appropriately sized food. Crushed flakes and small fish pellets or granules should work well, and as always, be careful not to overfeed. Live baby brine shrimp, daphnia, and live blackworms are excellent additions to their diet as well. And it's important to note that these gouramis also have a diet that includes baby shrimp, and some sparkling gouramis will even go after adult cherry shrimp as well, so caution is advised when keeping them with small shrimp. I would describe these fish as messy eaters, at least when it comes to eating these fish pellets. I don't like messy eaters, but it's not their fault, because this is not a very natural way for them to eat. These fish are micro-predators that should be feeding on small aquatic invertebrates, things like mosquito larvae, daphnia, bloodworms, and small insects that have fallen into the water. They're not supposed to be eating ground-up fish that has been dried out and made into a pellet. But they do it because fish are resilient animals who quickly learn to adapt and make the best out of whatever situation they're in. And with a steady diet of live baby brine shrimp, black worms, and fish pellets, my 6 sparkling gouramis grew quickly, and in less than 2 weeks after bringing them home, I found my first bubble nest with eggs. But that part of the story will have to wait for Chapter 2 when I talk about breeding them. And I have some great footage of them spawning as well. Then we'll take a look at the babies and see how the male cares for the young. So join me for part 2 of this story as we continue to take a detailed look at these amazing fish.